Good evening, everyone. At this time, I'd like to call to order the Fishers Board of Zoning Appeals meeting for Wednesday, December 22nd, 2021. At this time, I'd ask you to please rise to state our Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Yes, Mr. Grinslade.
Here.
Mr. Stevenson.
Here.
And Mr. Ferrucci.
Here, we have a quorum and we can conduct business this evening. Our first order of business will be approval of the previous minutes from November 27th, 2021.
I'd make a motion to approve those minutes. Second.
Secretary?
Mr. Grinslade.
Yes.
Mr. Stevenson.
Yes.
Mr. Ferrucci.
Yes.
Thank you.
Motion passes. At this time, I'd like to open the public hearing for case VA 21-49, Gatz accessory structure. Allison Gatz, hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly, is requesting a variance of development standards to allow for the replacement of a shed 5 feet from a side property line as opposed to the setback of at least 10 feet required by the Fishers Unified Development Ordinance. The site is zoned R1 and is located at 12983 Fawns Ridge within the Fawns Brookwoods subdivision, generally located on the east side of Allisonville Road and south of East 131st Street. Our petitioner is Allison Gatz. I'd ask the petitioner to please come to the podium, state their name and address, and proceed with their petition, please.
Hi, my name is Allison Gatz, G-A-T-Z.
Thank you. Go ahead with your petition, Allison.
Do I just hit the arrow to get it up there? Oh, there it is. Okay. Sorry, it's been a week since I looked at this. This is basically the setback of the UDO that we're looking for a variance of, and that is the 10 feet from the side property line what we're looking for. Our current shed is actually between 4.7 feet and 5 feet off the property line now, and we just want to replace the shed in its current place. This is really, really hard to see, but actually when we knew we were going to replace the shed, we went ahead and did an updated survey. And so I'll zoom in on this on the next slide, but the little red area right there is an extension of the current shed, so right in front of that, right there. So you'll see where it says 5 feet, 4.7, that's our shed currently, with the driveway leading up to it. And we're going to put a shed there, but we're also going to extend the shed. But it'll be in the same footprint. This is the drainage easement permit that we had to get, because if you go back, there's a drainage easement now that goes 7.5 feet on the neighbor's side and 7.5 feet on our side. So we got that drainage easement permit filed with the Hamilton County Recorder's Office. So that's what this permit is. This is an aerial of the property. Even though we have over 2 acres just on the other side of the trampoline, that is a big drop off, and then a majority of our acreage is actually flat property down by the creek. But if you see the current shed to the right, and then there's like a dirt area, there actually used to be a second shed there, but it was torn down before we bought the property. So now we're just gonna have a 1-story shed that extends to that original footprint. These are the current pictures, and if you look at the shed, you know why it needs to be replaced. The shed was there when we bought the property, and the concrete driveway leading up to the shed was already there as well. The top right picture with the trash cans, that is the neighbor's property with the fence, and you'll see that there's the 5 feet right there in between the two. And then the back picture of the shed. This is looking at it from a different angle. And if we needed to move the shed over to the 10 feet UDO standard, that would put us right up against or pretty close to the pool deck, and that's not possible. And then that's another view of it. And then the two pictures where all the trees are and stuff, that just kind of shows you the drop off on the back property. So there's nowhere else really to put a shed in the backyard. And then this is just a markup of the new shed. Ta-da.
Thank you.
Tyler has it.
At this time, I'm going to go ahead and open the public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak as to this petition, I'd ask you to please approach the podium. Seeing none, I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing and ask staff to present, please.
Good evening, my name is Tyler Folk. I'm a planner with the City of Fishers, presenting the staff report on VA 21-49, GATS Accessory Structure Development Standards Variance. Petitioner is Allison Gatz, the homeowner. She just spoke. The location is 12983 Fawns Ridge, Fishers, Indiana, in the Fawnsbrook Woods subdivision. The current zoning is R1, which is residential. And the existing conditions. So the shed in question has been present since at least 2001 per the City of Fishers aerial photography. So currently the shed is legal non-conforming. However, because the GATS would like to tear down, replace the shed, and then also expand the shed, that's what has introduced the need for the variance. They're seeking a variance from the Unified Development Ordinance, Article 6.2, Section 6.2.2, Residential Accessory Structures, Paragraph C, placement. The Unified Development Ordinance requires accessory structures to be at least 10 feet away from side property lines. This request is to allow an existing shed that is only 5 feet away from the western side property line to be replaced and enlarged. So here's a map of the location of the parcel, outlined in red there. Zooming in here, you can see that most of the lot is wooded as it goes towards, I believe that is Shoemaker Ditch. Here is their plot plan. Allison presented this same SketchUp earlier. As you can see, the shed expansion is outlined in red. Here is another aerial photography with topography. As you can see, once you get past the grassed area of the yard, the property slopes down very substantially towards Shoemaker Ditch and the wooded portion of the lot. Again, zooming in here, the existing shed is the black square, the planned expansion is the area in red. As was stated, the proposed replacement shed will encroach 2.5 feet into a 7.5 foot side yard drainage easement. The petitioner applied for and was granted a drainage easement permit from the city's Department of Public Works to permit the drainage easement encroachment. That is Viewpoint Cloud Docket DE-21-248. Public comments. A letter from the adjacent western property owner, Mr. John M. Kyle, was received on December 6, 2021. In his letter, Mr. Kyle states that we have no objection to this variance request. So that is the property that is adjacent to where the replacement shed would be. Staff has no recommendation for the board. Should the board approve this petition, staff recommends it is done with the condition that the variance is recorded on the property with the county. You have any questions?
Members of the board, any questions?
I guess I have one question. Mr. Folk, you said there was one public comment from the neighbor, Mr. Kyle.
Yes.
Since our previous meeting, have we received any other public comments?
We have
regarding
not.
this? Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Folk or for the petitioner?
No.
Okay, do we have a motion?
Yes, Mr. President, I would make a motion that we approve the petition with the condition that the variance is recorded on the property with the county.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Secretary?
Mr. Grinslade,
Yes.
Mr. Stevenson,
Yes.
and Mr. Ferrucci.
Yes, motion passes. Thank you. Our next order of business is VA 21-50 and VA 21-51 Heartland Church Columbarium. Alyssa Prezu, hopefully I'm saying that correctly, and Context Design on behalf of Heartland Church is requesting a variance of development standards and a variance of use to allow for the replacement of a columbarium in the R2 zoning and 65.5 feet from the north property line as opposed to 100 required by the Fishers UDO. The cemetery use is not permitted in an R2 zoning per the permitted use table of the Fishers UDO. The site is located at 14900 East 126th Street. We'd ask that the petitioners step forward to the podium, state their name and address, please.
My name is Alyssa Prezo with Context Design. Our address is 5825 Lawton Loop East Drive, Indianapolis, Indiana. We are here on behalf of the petitioner Heartland Church. They are at 14900, is that right? Okay. 126th Street in Fishers.
Thank you.
We are asking for 2 variances tonight. How do I get the other screen up? Yes. All right. Thank you. The first being the use of a cemetery, but in this case is a columbarium, which by state law is defined as the same thing within the property. The property is zoned R2, and a cemetery use is not currently allowed per the UDO. And in this case, we are asking the Heartland Church, which is a religious facility, to be allowed to incorporate a columbarium into a pergola structure that has been planned for the property since day one when we worked with the planning department before. In working with Bree, she said I wasn't sure what a columbarium was when we first talked about it, so we have a few definitions up here. So the columbarium is a room or a building that contains a series of niches, and a niche is an 8x8 by 12 inches deep, or it can be a little bit larger as well, that holds a container that then holds a plastic bag that then holds the cremains of the deceased. So there's a lot of protection there. And the outside of a columbarium is usually, the facade is a granite stone, which it will be in this case. And that granite can be just the granite, or it can have things engraved on it, whether it's words or pictures or whatever that might be. Because of the containment of the cremains, there will be nothing buried in the ground on the property. It will all be within these niches and contained and locked safely behind the granite doors that are on there. The second variance is the location of that columbarium. Again, per the UDO, it states that it has to be at least 100 feet from the property line. And in this case, because Heartland Church wants to incorporate it into a pergola structure, that location was established a long time ago. And to the north, you can see that the distance is only around 55 feet. So we are closer to the north boundary than allowed per the UDO. Some of the questions that have been brought up during the process and working with the planning department are, what does the state require for the use of a cemetery? And we have used Scott Overdorf, who is a member of Heartland Church, as some legal interpretation. And based on his findings, there is no permit required for putting a columbarium on a religious property. There's also no need for a long-term funding source for that use at a church because it is at a church. The only requirement is that if this is approved, that the columbarium needs to be platted and surveyed and registered with the county, which the church is more than happy to do that. A few of the other questions is the longevity of the church. So Heartland Church has been around since 2001, and the main pastors are Darren and Lori Shushki. They are very, very kind people. I've met both of them. Their hearts are definitely into this church, that's for sure. They have so many plans that they want to put into place, not just for Fishers, but the whole region and the whole state, and if my guess is the whole nation at some point, if they possibly can. Their goal with every decision is to reach out, and as it says, to know Christ, and that is their goal in everything that they do. And they see this, the addition of this columbarium, which is also incorporated into a pergola, which is incorporated into an outdoor space for not just celebrating somebody's life that's been lost, but celebrating marriages and just celebrating life in general. So you can see the location here. It's where 126th Street and Southeastern Parkway come together. A few of the other questions from the neighbors that were brought up is a claim that this will decrease their property value. And the elements that have been placed on Heartland Church property include a walking path that is paved, a stone path that is Stations of the Cross. So there are 14 stations where typically one person, maybe two, can stop and just contemplate life in general, as well as a park-like setting, which is what Pastor Darren has asked for. So there's a lot of variety of trees and shrubs, and just a rolling topography through the area. And the research shows that elements like this, they don't decrease property value, but instead they do increase property value. I would assume, since you're on this board, you know a lot of what the city has done, and know that trails are important in this community, and a lot of effort goes into that, and that they just wanted to add to the system that's been put in place already. So this is the overall master plan of the site. We are focused on the upper left-hand corner, which is here, and you can see the dimensions of where the columbarium will be located. 141 feet from the western property line and 55 feet 6 inches from the north property line. Again, the columbarium is incorporated into the pergola structure, which you can see in the renderings here. The plant material, the individual trees are already in place on the site, and the plant material around the pergola has yet to be installed because the pergola is not yet built. And as we flip through these, you can see that there's a lot of vegetation that's already been incorporated. Along the back side of this space will be tall evergreen shrubs will be installed to physically block off the view of this entire space. It's meant to be contemplative for the burial of somebody within the niches. And the church's intention is not to have a group of 20 or 30 people out for that burial ceremony. That would take place in the church itself. And then just the pastor and a direct family member would then go and put it within the columbarium itself. This is meant for somebody to come visit and just reflect on their loved one's memories, not to have a large funeral in this space. So these are just some more views of this. You can see this is the actual columbarium of what it would look like. So there are several sections of it for about 1,000 niches in total. So within the pergola itself, there are 5 sections, and then there will be 3 additional walls along the to frame the outside of it, all of which is contained by the evergreen hedgerow that you saw earlier. This is the main, on the other side of the pergola, the celebration space. This is going to be installed whether the columbarium is approved or not. They have plans to move forward with this space regardless. This was just an added benefit for their congregation so that they can have their loved ones close by. And this is a video where many of the shots were shown, and just so you can kind of walk through the space to see what the scale and the feel of it. So this is the main celebratory space. Don't touch it. It's a really big file. And then these are where the columbarium niches would go. So you can see the 5 sections in the in the pergola itself. And then as it zooms out, on the other side of the evergreen row are 3 more sections of freestanding walls. And then this is the Stations of the Cross path that we discussed earlier. And then the walking path that is installed now, and it is well used by the community. And as you can see, as you get further away from the pergola, the vegetation as it matures and some of the topography on site, it'll be very difficult to even see that it is there without coming right upon it. And that's what we have.
At this time, I'd open the public hearing. If anyone here is from the public would like to speak on this petition, I'd ask you to please approach the podium, state your name and address for the record. Seeing no members of the public, I'll go ahead and close the public hearing and ask for staff to present, please.
Bree King, Planning and Zoning. So we are here on behalf of Heartland Church, who is currently zoned R2. The surrounding uses is residential to the north, south, to the east across Southeastern is another religious use, and then to the west is a school. Here you can see it is at the intersection of 126 and Southeastern on the northeast side of Fishers. The left image here shows the main campus in relation to the surrounding neighborhoods. And then the picture on the right shows in the blue box the area where the columbarium is proposed to be placed. So Heartland Church is seeking 2 variances at this time. The first is a use variance, which is looking for a cemetery to be allowed in an R2 zoning. And the second is a variance of development standards to allow for a permanent structure erected for the interment of human remains within 100 feet from the nearest property line, which is the property line to the north. Here you can see the permitted use table. And I've just highlighted here that cemetery is not an allowed use in an R2 district. And then in the lower corner, you can see the use-specific standards for a cemetery, which is what the petitioner is asking for the development standards variance from. It's already been made clear, but I'm going to go ahead and state it again. A columbarium is a structure with niches which are used to store human cremated remains in an above-ground setting. The proposed columbarium will contain over 1,000 niches, and the niches are proposed to be sold, and net proceeds will be put aside to develop a long-term fund for regular maintenance and landscaping. Heartland Church has invested millions of dollars on their main campus and does not intend to close this headquarters. By their calculations, they indicate that they will be debt-free within 5 years and do plan to expand their ministry. In response to staff questions, the church provided this information about if the campus were to close. There are two main scenarios. So if the campus was sold to a religious use, ownership and maintenance of the columbarium would be included in the purchase agreement. If the purchaser is not a religious use, then Heartland would undertake the replication of the columbarium and move the cremains per niche sale contract, or return the remains to family members. The columbarium can be relocated to a different site as a unit. Here, once again, you can see the location is in that northwest corner. As mentioned, the landscaping trees are existing and additional landscaping will be placed when the columbarium and pergola are constructed. There are currently no plans to expand the columbarium and add additional niches. If an expansion were proposed, a new variance could be required depending on the location of the expansion. Here I've just highlighted that the closest property line is 55.5 feet away, and that is the northern property line. As I'll mention in more detail later, we have received one piece of remonstration, and that details the property that is to the rear. So the property with the more than 100 feet of setback. Here are images from the video that show the design. As you can see, the landscape screening is present, and there will be additional landscaping placed. Craig Gallagher is a resident in the Avalon community, which is that community to the northwest of the church. He emailed asking questions about the proposal, but did not provide support or remonstration as of tonight. Our only remonstrator is the property owner that is directly abutting the church property. Some of her concerns mentioned people gathering very close to their backyard for funerals, weddings, or other events. They are concerned about the landscape barrier between properties. They're also uncomfortable with the idea of human remains and were worried about property value. Here are some photos from the site. They are looking from Heartland Church property towards the remonstrator's home. As you can see, there are existing trees and foliage. We could probably see it better if these pictures were taken in spring. That does show the existing site location. When doing research on this project, staff had two main concerns about the legality. Staff was concerned if state permitting was required, and as well as details on the maintenance of ground and structure, such as perpetual care funds. We do believe that these concerns were addressed in the petitioner's presentation, as well as the letter from their legal representation. Staff does not have a recommendation on these variances. If approved, we do have a few commitments. One, that the variance approval letter be recorded with the county. We also request that all additional landscape elements must be native species per the Fisher's Planting Guide. And we have a last commitment that the variance shall be tied to places of worship unless otherwise approved by the Department of Planning and Zoning. The last two commitments that are in a lighter shade of gray are if the board would like to address the remonstrator's concerns. So it could be that the use variance is tied to the approval of the footprint of the columbarium as proposed. And the last commitment could be if the board decides that landscaping shall be provided to screen from the residential property to the northwest per the Fisher's UDO small size buffer yard standards, excluding mounding or fence requirements. So I do have a slide that indicates what those small buffer yard standards are. As you can see, the arrow on the top shows these exact standards. It does require a 30-foot minimum width buffer yard with 5 canopy trees per 100 feet, 3 evergreen trees that must be placed between 5 to 15 feet from property line, 5 shrubs per 100 feet, and we will be suggesting that the mounding and fencing not be required as part of that commitment if the board chooses to place that commitment on the variances. And staff is available for questions.
Members of the board, do you have any questions?
I had one question, but I think it was answered in the petitioner's presentation as relates to what would happen if the church ceased to use the property as a religious use, and those questions were answered to my satisfaction.
I do have a question. I think during the presentation, it was mentioned that if there was an expansion of the columbarium, there could be another variance required, but not necessarily so. Have the staff talked to the petitioner about the voluntary commitment of the use variance tied to the footprint as presented, such that if they decided they wanted to expand, they'd need to come back to us again to ask for that expansion?
So I believe that was mentioned in the pre-file. That commitment was added late last week as a response to the remonstration that we received.
Okay. And is a petitioner, ma'am, would you please step back to the podium? Is that something that might be acceptable to the petitioner, that if we approve it, the use variance would be tied to the footprint as presented?
Yes, that is acceptable to the petitioner, that if they ask beyond the 1,000 niches that they're proposing now, that they would come back to your group.
And as far as the second additional voluntary commitment of landscape screening, the small buffer yard standards, is that something also that the petitioner would consider?
Yes, they're more than happy to work specifically with the neighbor to help screen that view, whether it's the landscaping up against the actual columbarium or the addition of the small buffer yard, or even both. They would be willing to do both.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay. Seeing no questions, do we have a motion?
I make a motion to deny VA 2150 and VA 2151.
We have a motion to deny. Secretary, could you call the roll?
Don't you have to
I don't have a
second?
second.
Oh,
You have to have a
excuse me.
second first.
My apologies.
Yeah,
Is there a second?
I don't second that.
Okay. So, and I, nor do I, so there's no second. At this point, I think the motion to deny would fail. It's not made. So we have a motion that has not been made. Do we have a motion to approve the petition?
Yes, we do. Yeah.
Okay.
I have a motion to approve both petitions, and I can't remember the recommendations for the conditions. Can the staff put that back up for me? And I'm referring to the staff's recommendations. Does the staff recommend all 5 of those? Is that what that presentation is saying? That slide?
So we recommend the top 3 exclusively, and then if you wish to address the remonstrous concerns, we also highly recommend the last 2 as well.
Yeah. So I'll modify my recommendation. I'll recommend that we approve both matters, and on the condition that the variance approval letter is recorded with the county. All additional landscape elements must be native species per the Fisher's Planning Guide, and then also the variance shall be tied to places of worship unless otherwise approved by the Department of Planning and Zoning.
And I would second that motion, but I'd also ask for additional voluntary commitments of the use variance tied to the approval of the footprint, and that there be landscaping to provide screen for residential properties to the northwest pursuant to the Fisher's UDO small-size buffer yard standards, excluding mounding or fence requirements. Is that acceptable?
Yes, that is acceptable to me if the petitioners are.
Friendly amendments.
Yeah.
So we have a motion. I have a second. Secretary, could you call the roll and when convenient for you?
Mr. Grinslade,
Yes.
Mr. Stevenson,
Yes.
and Mr. Ferrucci.
Yes. So the motion passes.
Thank you.
Okay. The motion does pass. And at this point, the next order of business would be Any old business? New business? Staff communication, or 2022 meeting schedule, I think you've sent out. Any comments from the board about that? Okay.
Nope, and I just want to say happy holidays. Thank you to you three for holding this special meeting right before the holidays, and thanks to the petitioners as well. We'll see you guys next year.
Happy holidays to you too, and thank you for
Thank you.
all the work that you guys have done this year for the city. We very much appreciate your commitment to the city of Fishers. So happy holidays to you and your families as well. Thank you. With that, I'm going to close the meeting.